The Galactic Council had witnessed the fall of 17 civilizations. Each time, they followed the same protocol: emergency evacuation, refugee relocation, and careful documentation of another species' extinction. The pattern was always identical. A mysterious force would appear, consume everything, and vanish without a trace. For 3,000 years, this cosmic predator had been unstoppable, until the day Counselor HFY burst into the emergency session, his crystalline form crackling with panic-induced energy. "The Devourers," he gasped, his voice echoing through the vast chamber. "They've changed course. They're no longer following the standard spiral pattern through our galaxy." High Admiral HFY, her 6 arms tensing with dread, leaned forward. "Where are they heading?" The silence that followed was deafening. Every eye, sensor, and consciousness in the chamber focused on the trembling counselor as he projected the star map. A red line traced across the holographic display, cutting through space like a cosmic blade, pointing directly at a small yellow star in an unremarkable arm of the galaxy. "Sol System," HFY whispered. "Third planet. They call it Earth." What happened next would shatter everything the Council thought they knew about survival, warfare, and the indomitable spirit that some species carry in their very DNA. For the first time in galactic history, someone was about to fight back. And the universe was about to learn why humans had survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and themselves. The Devourers were coming for Earth. But Earth was ready to come for them. The massive crystalline chamber of the Galactic Council had never hosted such chaos. Representatives from 47 different species filled the floating platforms, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of clicks, chirps, mental projections, and harmonic frequencies. At the center of it all, High Admiral HFY stood with her 6 arms raised, trying to restore order to the assembly that governed 3/4 of the known galaxy. "Silence!" Her voice boomed through the translation matrices, and gradually the noise subsided. Her insectoid features remained stoic, but those who knew her could see the tension in the way her mandibles clicked together. "Counselor HFY has requested emergency session privileges. The floor recognizes the crystalline collective." HFY materialized at the speaking podium, his translucent body flickering with nervous energy patterns. The being was ancient, even by Council standards, having served for over 800 Earth years. His people were known for their calm, logical approach to governance, which made his current agitated state all the more alarming to the Assembly. "Honored colleagues," he began, his voice carrying the harmonious tones of his species. "For the past 3 millennia, we have documented the systematic destruction of 17 civilizations by the entities we have come to call the Devourers. Each time, despite our best efforts, we have failed to prevent these extinctions." A ripple of discomfort passed through the chamber. The Devourer threat was the Council's greatest shame, a reminder of their limitations despite all their advanced technology and combined knowledge. "The pattern has always been consistent," HFY continued, projecting a 3-dimensional star map that filled the center of the chamber. "They emerge from dark space, follow a spiral path through our galaxy, consume every trace of organic and technological life they encounter, then disappear back into the void between galaxies. Red dots mark the locations of the destroyed civilizations, forming a clear spiral pattern across one arm of the galaxy. The Zerani, with their floating cities. The Boardhack, master geneticists who could reshape life itself. The Veltar, energy beings who had transcended physical form. All gone, consumed completely, leaving behind only empty space and the Council's inadequate records. However, HFY-9's form brightened with an almost electric intensity. 6 standard cycles ago, our deep space monitoring stations detected something unprecedented. The Devourer fleet has altered its trajectory. The holographic display shifted, and a new path appeared in brilliant blue, breaking away from the established spiral pattern and cutting across the galaxy in a straight line. Gasps, clicks, and mental static filled the chamber as the representatives processed this information. Ambassador Thylex of the Molten Worlds, her lava-like form bubbling with agitation, spoke first. This is impossible. The Devourers have never deviated from their pattern. Never. The evidence is irrefutable, HFY-9 replied, his form dimming with the weight of what he had to share. Our best xenobiologists believe they have detected something that has captured their interest more than our established civilizations. High Admiral Kethra felt a chill run down her exoskeleton. Show us their destination. The star map zoomed in, following the blue trajectory line as it cut across thousands of light years, past established council territories, beyond the frontier worlds, into the outer rim regions that most civilized species considered barely worth exploring. The line ended at a small yellow star surrounded by several planets. Sol System, ZYX-9 announced. Specifically, the third planet from their star. Local designation, Earth. The chamber erupted again, but this time the chaos had a different quality. Most of the representatives had never heard of Earth or its inhabitants. The few who had dismissed it as another primitive world not worthy of council attention. What do we know about this system? High Admiral Kethra demanded. Professor Quilnack, the Tentharian xenobiologist whose people specialized in cataloging primitive species, activated his personal display. His slug-like form glistened as he accessed the Council's databases. Earth is inhabited by a single sapient species called humans. They achieved nuclear technology approximately 80 of their years ago, but have not yet developed faster-than-light travel or energy manipulation beyond basic fusion. Primitive, Ambassador Thylex bubbled dismissively. Barely worth cataloging, let alone protecting. Perhaps, Professor Quilnack continued, but they do exhibit some unusual characteristics. They are what our xenopsychologists classify as a death world species. The term sent another wave of discussion through the chamber. Death world species were rare. Evolve on planets so hostile that most council races wouldn't last minutes on their surface. Such species were typically incredibly resilient, but also dangerously unpredictable. Elaborate, High Admiral Kethra commanded. Earth's gravity is approximately 1.7 times standard council baseline. The atmospheric composition includes free oxygen at levels that will be toxic to 60% of council species. The planet experiences extreme temperature variations, violent weather patterns, seismic activity, and harbors millions of species in constant evolutionary warfare. Professor Quilnack's display showed images that made many representatives recoil. Massive storms that dwarfed anything most species had experienced. Volcanic eruptions that could devastate continents. Predators so perfectly evolved for killing that they had remained virtually unchanged for millions of years. The inhabitants have evolved to not just survive these conditions, but to thrive in them. They possess remarkable physical durability, adaptability, and what can only be described as an unusual relationship with violence and conflict. Meaning, prompted Counselor ZYX-9, where most species develop civilization by overcoming their aggressive tendencies, humans appear to have developed civilization by channeling theirs. They have fought continuous wars throughout their recorded history, yet somehow use conflict as a catalyst for technological and social advancement. Images flashed across the display. Human soldiers in countless conflicts, their weapons evolving from clubs and spears to nuclear weapons in a remarkably short time. Cities rising from the ashes of destruction. Technologies originally developed for warfare being adapted for exploration and healing. Fascinating, mused Dr. Velnera, the ethereal collective's representative, her gossamer form shimmering with interest. But surely this makes them even less equipped to face the Devourers. No amount of primitive aggression can stand against a force that consumed the Veltar energy masters. That's what we assumed. ZYX-9 interjected, his form brightening again. However, our analysis suggests something else may have attracted the Devourers to Earth. He manipulated the holographic display, showing detailed scans of human technology and society. Despite their primitive status, humans have developed several technologies that our xenotechnicians find intriguing. The display zoomed in on images of human spacecraft, crude by Council standards but showing remarkable innovation in design. Then came their information networks, primitive quantum experiments, and, most surprisingly, their entertainment media. They have an unusual cognitive ability to conceptualize and plan for scenarios beyond their experience. Their fiction contains detailed descriptions of space combat, alien invasions, and survival tactics that, while impossible with their current technology, show a sophisticated understanding of strategic thinking. Fiction. Ambassador Thylex's form bubbled with confusion. You mean imaginary scenarios? Yes, but they treat these scenarios as serious intellectual exercises. They have thousands of years of accumulated strategic thinking about fighting superior enemies, surviving impossible odds, and turning disadvantage into victory. It's as if their entire species has been unconsciously preparing for a conflict like this. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. High Admiral Kethare's mandibles clicked rapidly as she processed this information. Are you suggesting that the Devourers are attracted to Earth because humans represent some kind of challenge? I'm suggesting, ZYX9's form pulsed with intensity, that after 3 millennia of unopposed destruction, the Devourers may have finally found a species that won't simply submit to extinction. Councillor Mordak of the Hive Clusters, his insectoid form bristling with agitation, projected his thoughts directly into the translation matrix. This is speculation beyond reason. No primitive species can threaten the Devourers. We have a responsibility to evacuate these humans before they are consumed like all the others. And if we can't? Dr. Velnara asked quietly. Our evacuation protocols assume cooperation from the target species. Humans have no knowledge of galactic civilization, no understanding of the threat they face, and no means of interstellar travel. Then, we make contact, High Admiral Kethare declared. We warn them, offer what assistance we can, and prepare for another evacuation and documentation process. But even as she spoke the words, Kethare felt something she hadn't experienced in centuries of dealing with the Devourer threat. Uncertainty. Every previous encounter had followed predictable patterns. This time, something was different. The Devourers had changed their behavior for the first time in recorded history, drawn to a primitive world by something the Council didn't understand. Professor Quilnak's voice cut through her thoughts. There is one more thing the Council should consider. Yes, humans have a linguistic concept that appears frequently in their historical records, their fiction, and their military doctrine. Our translation matrices struggle with it because it has no equivalent in any other known language. What is it? They call it spite. The closest translation would be the willingness to accept personal destruction in order to inflict damage on an enemy. But that doesn't capture the full meaning. Humans appear capable of becoming more dangerous when facing impossible odds, not less. The chamber remained silent as this information was processed. Finally, High Admiral Kethare spoke. Council Resolution 847 Alpha. Contact protocols are authorized for the Sol system. We will attempt to warn the humans of the approaching threat and offer evacuation assistance. However, given the unprecedented nature of this situation, we will also prepare for alternative scenarios. As the session ended and representatives began filing out, ZYX9 remained at the podium, staring at the holographic image of Earth. Something about this small blue world had attracted the attention of the galaxy's most unstoppable force. Soon, they would discover whether humanity's greatest strength lay in their ability to survive or in their willingness to fight back against the impossible. The Devourers would arrive in 18 Earth months. For the first time in galactic history, someone might actually be ready for them. The United Nations building in New York had hosted many historic moments, but nothing quite like what was about to unfold in Conference Room Alpha 7. The room had been hastily cleared and equipped with translation devices that most of the humans present couldn't even pronounce the names of, let alone understand how they worked. Secretary General Maria Santos stood at the head of the conference table, her hands steady despite the magnitude of what was happening. Around the table sat representatives from every major nation, military leaders, and scientists whose credentials included things like xenobiology and theoretical physics that had been purely academic until 3 days ago. 3 days ago, when High Admiral Ketharay's ship had appeared in Earth's orbit and sent a message that changed everything humanity thought they knew about their place in the universe. Ladies and gentlemen, Secretary General Santos began, her voice carrying the weight of representing an entire species. I know this situation is unprecedented. Alien contact was always a theoretical possibility, but none of our protocols prepared us for this. General Harrison, the American Joint Chiefs representative, leaned forward in his chair. His weathered face showed the strain of the past 72 hours. With respect, Madam Secretary General, our primary concern should be the military implications. We have confirmed that there are 17 alien vessels in our solar system, and they're claiming to represent something called a Galactic Council. They're also claiming, interrupted Dr. Sarah Chun, director of SETI, that something called Devourers is coming to destroy our entire planet in 18 months. I think that takes priority over military posturing. Admiral Volkov from the Russian Navy nodded grimly. Our satellites have confirmed the energy signatures. These ships are using technology we can't begin to understand. If they wanted to destroy us, we wouldn't have time to discuss it. The door to the conference room opened, and a figure that belonged in science fiction rather than diplomatic reality entered. High Admiral Ketharay had to duck to fit through the human-sized doorway. Her 6 arms folded in what her cultural briefing had indicated was a gesture of respect among humans. Her insectoid features were alien, but not threatening, though several of the military representatives instinctively tensed. Behind her came Professor Quillnack, his slug-like form moving on a small anti-gravity platform, and Dr. Velnara, whose ethereal, translucent form seemed to shift and flow like captured starlight. Secretary General Santos, High Admiral Ketharay, spoke through the translation device that rendered her harmonic language in accented but clear English. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. I know this situation must be overwhelming for your species. That's putting it mildly, Santos replied, gesturing for the aliens to take their positions at the specially arranged section of the table. Your initial message was alarming. I'm afraid our subsequent communications will be even more so, Ketharay said. Professor Quillnack, please share your analysis. The Tentharian scientist activated a holographic display that materialized above the conference table, showing a 3-dimensional map of the galaxy. Red dots marked the destroyed civilizations, creating a spiral pattern that made several humans inhale sharply. For 3,000 Earth years, Professor Quillnack began, his translated voice carrying an oddly melodic quality. These entities we call Devourers have systematically destroyed every civilization they encounter. 17 species, completely extinct. No survivors, no traces left behind. President Zhang of China studied the display intently. You're saying these Devourers have destroyed 17 entire species? Completely. Dr. Velnara's ethereal voice seemed to whisper from everywhere at once. The Zerani have floating cities that could relocate anywhere in their solar system within hours. The board hack could manipulate genetics so precisely they could adapt to any environment in real time. The Veltar had transcended physical form entirely and existed as pure energy. None of it mattered. General Harrison's expression had grown progressively grimmer. And now they're coming for Earth. Yes, High Admiral Ketharay confirmed. But this time, something is different. For the first time in recorded history, the Devourers have deviated from their established pattern. They've specifically targeted Earth. The room fell silent except for the quiet hum of the alien technology. Finally, Dr. Chun spoke up. Why? What could possibly make our primitive civilization interesting to something that powerful. That, Professor Quillnack said, is what we're hoping you can help us understand. The holographic display shifted, showing detailed scans of human technology, society, and culture. Images flashed by military conflicts throughout history, space exploration achievements, the internet, nuclear weapons, medical advances born from wartime research. Your species is unique in the galactic catalog, Professor Quillnack continued. Most civilizations develop by overcoming their aggressive tendencies and focusing on peaceful cooperation. You appear to have developed by channeling your aggression into advancement. Meaning, asked Admiral Volkov. You fight constantly, yet your species grows stronger from conflict. You've turned competition into innovation, warfare into technology, and survival into exploration. Our xenopsychologists have never encountered anything like it. President Okafor of Nigeria leaned back in her chair. So, we're interesting because we're violent? That doesn't sound like a compliment. Not violent, Dor. Velnara corrected, her form shimmering. Adaptively competitive. Your species has spent its entire evolutionary history facing extinction-level events, and not just surviving them, but using them as catalysts for advancement. She gestured, and the display showed human history in rapid succession. Ice ages that led to tool development, plagues that drove medical innovation, wars that sparked technological revolutions, natural disasters that fostered international cooperation. Your fiction is perhaps the most telling aspect, Professor Quillnack added. Most species' entertainment focuses on harmony and cooperation. Yours is filled with scenarios where individuals or small groups face impossible odds and find ways to triumph through determination, innovation, and what you call thinking outside the box. General Harrison straightened. You're analyzing our movies and books. Your strategic thinking exercises, Kethra clarified. What you call fiction, we recognize as sophisticated scenario planning. For thousands of years, your species has been unconsciously preparing for threats beyond your current technological ability to face. Secretary General Santos felt a chill run down her spine. Are you saying the Devourers are attracted to Earth because they see us as some kind of challenge? We believe so, Professor Quillnack confirmed. Every species they've destroyed previously submitted to extinction when faced with overwhelming force. Your species has no historical precedent for submission. The room erupted in multiple conversations as world leaders processed this information. Admiral Volkov was the first to regain focus. What do we know about these Devourers? Their capabilities, their technology? Very little, Kethra admitted. They appear in massive ships that seem to be partly organic, partly technological. They strip planets of all biological and technological resources, leaving behind only barren rock. They show no interest in communication and have never retreated from any engagement. How big are their ships? General Harrison asked. The smallest vessels we've observed are approximately 50 kilometers in length. The largest? Kethra paused. The largest was recorded at over 300 kilometers. The silence that followed was deafening. Dr. Chen finally broke it. That's larger than most asteroids. Yes, Professor Quillnack confirmed. They typically arrive in fleets of 12 to 20 vessels. Our military analysts estimate they could sterilize most inhabited planets in a matter of hours. President Zhang stood and walked to the window, staring out at the New York skyline. So we have 18 months to prepare for an enemy that has never been defeated, using technology we can't possibly match, coming in ships larger than our cities. That's correct, Kethra said quietly. What's your council's standard protocol in these situations? Santos asked. Evacuation, Dr. Velnara replied. We attempt to relocate as many individuals as possible to other worlds before the Devourers arrive. And how many can you evacuate? President Okafor asked. The pause that followed answered the question before the words did. Our current evacuation fleet could relocate approximately 50,000 individuals, Professor Quillnack admitted. The number hung in the air like a death sentence. 8 billion people on Earth. 50,000 evacuation slots. That's not evacuation, General Harrison said grimly. That's documentation for future historians. Which brings us to why we're really here, High Admiral Kethare said, her four eyes focusing intently on the human representatives. For the first time in 3 millennia, the Council is considering an alternative to evacuation and documentation. Which is? Santos asked. We fight back. The words seemed to electrify the room. Military leaders straightened, scientists leaned forward, and politicians' minds began racing through possibilities and implications. You're talking about war, Admiral Volkov stated. We're talking about survival, Kethare corrected. The Council has resources, technology, and the combined knowledge of 47 species. What we've never had is a species that approaches conflict the way humans do. Dr. Chen looked skeptical. What exactly are you proposing? A joint defense initiative, Professor Quilnack explained. We provide you with advanced technology, tactical information, and strategic support. You provide us with something we've never had in dealing with the Devourers, a species that specializes in winning impossible wars. This is insane, President Zhang said, turning back to the room. You're talking about humanity going to war with something that has destroyed 17 advanced civilizations. Yes, Kethare said simply. Because the alternative is extinction, and your species has made it very clear throughout your history that extinction is not an acceptable outcome. Secretary General Santos looked around the table at the representatives of her species, seeing fear, determination, curiosity, and something else in their eyes. Something that Professor Quilnack had been trying to translate for the past few days. If we agreed to this insanity, she said slowly, what would we be fighting for? Just Earth. Just humanity. Everything, Dr. Velnera said, her form brightening with intensity. The Devourers won't stop with Earth. This is the first time anyone has had even the theoretical possibility of stopping them. If we succeed, we save the galaxy, Santos finished. And if we fail, General Harrison added, at least we fail fighting. High Admiral Kethare's mandibles clicked in what her cultural briefing indicated might be approval. Professor Quilnack was right about your species. You really don't have a word for surrender, do you? Secretary General Santos stood, feeling the weight of speaking for 8 billion people and, apparently, the entire galaxy. Admiral, we'll need to consult with our respective governments, but speaking for myself, she looked around the table and saw the same determination reflected in every face. When do we start? As the meeting continued into the night, none of them realized they had just initiated the first cooperative military action between humanity and the galactic community. More importantly, none of them realized that 18 months from now, the galaxy would learn that some species don't just fight back against impossible odds. Some species fight back harder. 6 months had transformed the world in ways that would have seemed impossible before first contact. The massive construction facility floating in Earth's L4 Lagrange point represented the most ambitious engineering project in human history, a joint venture between Terran determination and Galactic Council technology that defied everything humanity thought they knew about physics. Commander Sarah Mitchell floated through the central corridor of what the humans had dubbed Olympus Station, though the Council members preferred its official designation, Joint Defense Platform Alpha. The name didn't matter. What mattered was what they were building inside it. Through the transparent aluminum viewports, she could see the skeletal framework of humanity's first true warship taking shape. The UHDS Defiance stretched nearly 2 kilometers from bow to stern, incorporating Council energy shielding technology with human tactical doctrine in ways that made both species engineers simultaneously excited and terrified. Commander Mitchell, came a harmonic voice behind her. She turned to see High Admiral Kethare approaching, her 6 arms carrying data tablets displaying construction progress reports. Admiral, Mitchell replied, pushing off the bulkhead to orient herself properly in the zero-gravity environment. After 6 months of working with the Council, Most humans had adapted to their guess customs. I was just reviewing the weapons integration reports, and Ketharay's mandibles clicked with what Mitchell had learned to recognize as anticipation. Your people keep asking if we're certain about the kinetic bombardment systems, Mitchell said with a slight smile. I think they're having trouble believing we want to use asteroids as ammunition. To be fair, Ketharay replied, most species consider hurling large rocks at enemies to be somewhat primitive. Most species didn't evolve on a planet where large rocks regularly fell from the sky and caused mass extinctions, Mitchell pointed out. We learned early that kinetic energy doesn't care about your technological sophistication. They continued down the corridor toward the central command center, where the real work was happening. The past 6 months had seen the most intensive technology transfer in galactic history, with Council scientists working alongside human engineers to create hybrid systems that neither species could have developed alone. The collaboration had produced remarkable results, but also significant challenges. Council technology was elegant, efficient, and designed for peaceful applications with defensive capabilities. Human military doctrine was focused on maximum damage output with acceptable losses, concepts that made many Council species deeply uncomfortable. How are the volunteer crews adapting to Council technology? Ketharay asked as they passed a training bay where human astronauts were learning to operate gravity manipulation systems. Better than expected, Mitchell replied. Though I think your people are still surprised by how quickly we adapt to new weapon systems. Dr. Velnara mentioned something about weaponizing everything. I'm not certain I understand the translation. Mitchell paused at another viewport, this one showing the assembly bay where human technicians were installing Council energy shields on modified Earth-built fighter craft. It means we have a tendency to look at any new technology and immediately figure out how to use it to hurt our enemies. For example, your medical nanobots that repair cellular damage? Our bioweapons specialists want to know if they can be programmed to do the opposite. Your gravity manipulation systems designed for cargo handling? Our physicists are calculating optimal gravitational weapon deployments. Your quantum communication arrays? Our tactical teams want to use them for coordinated strike operations. Ketharay's form stiffened slightly. That's actually quite disturbing from a Council perspective, but useful when fighting something that's exterminated 17 civilizations, Mitchell pointed out. Your people spent 3,000 years trying to hide from the Devourers or evacuate ahead of them. We're spending 18 months figuring out how to kill them. They entered the command center, a vast sphere lined with holographic displays showing the progress of what humans had started calling the preparation. The scale of the undertaking was staggering. Not just building warships, but creating an entirely new military doctrine that combined the best of human tactical thinking with Council technological superiority. Professor Quillnack was floating near the central display, his slug-like form surrounded by data streams as he coordinated with human strategic planners. Around him, officers from every Earth nation worked alongside Council military advisors, their conversations a mixture of Earth languages and harmonic frequencies from a dozen different species. Commander, Admiral, Professor Quillnack acknowledged their arrival. We've just received the latest intelligence reports from the deep space monitoring stations. The central display shifted to show a star map with a slowly moving cluster of red dots. The Devourer fleet, still 14 months out, but steadily approaching. How many? Mitchell asked. 19 vessels, Professor Quillnack replied. Largest fleet we've ever recorded them deploying. They're taking us seriously, Ketharay observed. Good, Mitchell said grimly. So are we. She gestured to the surrounding displays, which showed the current status of humanity's preparation efforts. In Earth's shipyards, construction continued around the clock on 17 more vessels like the Defiance. In hidden facilities across the solar system, human and Council engineers were developing weapon systems that neither species would have imagined independently. Status report on the special projects? Mitchell requested. Dr. Chen's voice came from across the command center as she approached with a tablet full of research data. Project Prometheus is ahead of schedule. We've successfully weaponized Council gravitic technology for area denial operations. Project Atlas has produced the first functional kinetic kill vehicles using Council propulsion systems. And Project Pandora, she paused, looking uncertain. Problem? Kethare asked. Not a problem exactly, Dr. Chen said. More of an ethical question. We've successfully combined Council nanotechnology with human bioweapons research. The result is effective beyond anything we anticipated. How effective? Professor Quillnack inquired. We can now produce nanoscale weapons that could theoretically consume organic matter and convert it into raw materials, Dr. Chen explained. They're self-replicating, adaptive, and nearly impossible to stop once released. The command center fell quiet as the implications sank in. Finally, Admiral Volkov spoke from his position near the tactical displays. In other words, we've created something that could do to the Devourers what they've been doing to everyone else. The question, Dr. Chen continued, is whether we should. This technology could destroy not just the Devourers, but any organic life it encounters, including us. Mitchell looked at the star map, studying the approaching red dots. What's the deployment scenario? Contained release, Dr. Chen replied. We've designed nanoscale containment protocols that should limit the effect to targeted areas. The weapons would consume their targets, then self-destruct after a predetermined time period. Should? Kethare's mandibles clicked with concern. 97% certainty of successful containment based on our simulations, Dr. Chen admitted. But we're dealing with technology that's beyond anything either of our species has attempted before. The discussion was interrupted by an alert from the communication station. Lieutenant Park, the human communications officer, looked up from her console with confusion. We're receiving a transmission from the outer system monitoring posts, she reported. But it's not from any of our people or council observers. Source? Mitchell demanded. Unknown. The signal is coming from the direction of the Devourer fleet, but it's still 12 months out. No way any conventional transmission could reach us from that distance. Professor Quillnack's form brightened with alarm. They're using quantum entanglement communication. That level of technology suggests their capabilities are even more advanced than we believed. Put it through, Mitchell ordered. The central display flickered, then resolved into an image that sent chills through every human and council member present. The being on the screen was vaguely humanoid, but wrong in every detail. Its skin had a metallic sheen, its eyes were pure black voids, and when it moved, parts of its body seemed to shift between organic and mechanical components. When it spoke, the voice came through in perfect English, though no human had ever taught the Devourers their language. Species designation. Human, the being said, its voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate in ways that made everyone listening feel deeply uncomfortable. We acknowledge your preparations. We acknowledge your collaboration with the Council species. We acknowledge your intent to resist consumption. Mitchell stepped forward. This is Commander Sarah Mitchell, representing the United Human Defense Force and the Galactic Council Joint Defense Initiative. Identify yourself. Identity is irrelevant. We are process. We are function. We are the clearing of the path for what comes after. The being's head tilted in a motion that was almost curious. You interest us, humans. Your species exhibits patterns we have not encountered in our catalog of consumed civilizations. What do you want? Mitchell demanded. To understand your reasoning. 17 species have been consumed. Each possessed technological capabilities superior to yours. Each possessed numerical superiority. Each possessed the accumulated knowledge of millennia. All were consumed completely. What logic drives your resistance to inevitable consumption? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Around the command center, human and council personnel looked to Mitchell for an answer that could speak for their entire alliance. Because, Mitchell said, her voice carrying the weight of 8 billion people and 47 allied species, inevitable is just another word for something no one's tried hard enough to prevent yet. The Devourer's expression didn't change, but Something in its posture suggested it was processing this response. Interesting. Your species approaches extinction as an engineering problem to be solved rather than a fate to be accepted. That's correct. We will test your solution in 14 Earth months. We anticipate documenting the failure of your engineering approach, as we have documented the failure of all previous approaches. You do that, Mitchell replied. We'll be ready. The transmission ended, leaving the command center in stunned silence. Finally, Admiral Volkov spoke what everyone was thinking. They wanted to know why we're fighting them. And now they know, Professor Quilnack added quietly. The question is, Kethara said, her form dimming with concern. What will they do with that information? Mitchell looked around the command center at the humans and aliens working together to build humanity's first line of defense against extinction. The same thing we're going to do with what we learned from them, which is use it to win. As the preparations continued around them, nobody mentioned the obvious implication of the Devourer transmission. For the first time in their recorded history, they were interested enough in a target species to make contact before consumption. Whether that was a good sign or a terrible one remained to be seen. In 14 months, they would find out which interpretation was correct. Until then, there was work to do, weapons to build, and a galaxy to save. The countdown had begun. The bridge of the UHDS Defiance hummed with quiet tension as Commander Sarah Mitchell watched the tactical display update in real time. After 18 months of preparation, the moment they had all been working toward was finally here. The Devourer fleet had dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system, and their intentions were crystal clear. Status report, Mitchell commanded, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they were facing. 19 confirmed Devourer vessels, reported Lieutenant Commander Zhang from the sensor station. Largest ship measures 312 kilometers in length. They're maintaining formation at approximately 40 million kilometers from Earth. Admiral Volkov's voice crackled through the communication system from his position aboard the Council Command vessel Harmony's Edge. All human and Council vessels are in position. Total defense fleet. 18 Earth-built ships, 24 Council vessels, and approximately 300 fighter craft. Mitchell studied the display showing both fleets. The numbers looked almost reasonable until you factored in the size difference. The smallest Devourer ship was larger than their biggest vessel. The largest was the size of a small moon. Hi, Admiral Kethara. Mitchell spoke into her communication device. Are your people ready for this? As ready as any species can be for something impossible, came Kethara's harmonic reply from the bridge of her flagship. Our energy shielding systems are functioning at optimal efficiency, and all vessels are prepared to implement the human tactical doctrine we've spent the past year learning. Dr. Chen's voice joined the conversation from the research vessel Discovery, positioned safely behind the main battle line. Prometheus weapons are ready for deployment. Atlas kinetic systems are loaded and targeted. Pandora protocols are standing by for authorization. Let's hope we don't need Pandora, Mitchell muttered, then addressed the fleet. All vessels, this is Defiance Actual. Remember what we've learned from 18 months of preparation. The Devourers have superior technology and numerical advantage, but they've never faced anything like us before. She paused, looking at the tactical display one more time. Council doctrine says we defend by attempting to minimize losses while inflicting maximum damage on the enemy. Human doctrine says we attack their ability to continue fighting until they can't. Today, we're going to show them what happens when you combine both approaches. The communication system activated, broadcasting on all frequencies. The same metallic being they had spoken with months earlier appeared on the main screen, its features as unsettling as before. Species designation, human and Council Alliance. It spoke in multiple languages simultaneously. You have positioned your vessels in a defensive formation. This is consistent with previous Council behavior when facing consumption. However, we detect anomalous energy signatures and weapon configurations consistent with aggressive rather than defensive tactical doctrine. This is Commander Mitchell, she replied. We're not here to be consumed. We're here to stop you from consuming anyone else. Interesting. Previous species have attempted to negotiate terms of consumption or to delay consumption through defensive actions. You appear to be proposing prevention of consumption through force. That's correct. This approach has not been tested previously. We will evaluate its effectiveness. The transmission ended, and almost immediately, the Devourer fleet began moving. The massive ships accelerated toward the inner system with technology that made them blur across space faster than anything that size should have been able to move. All vessels, engage as planned, Mitchell commanded. Remember, we're not trying to match their strength. We're trying to break their expectations. The first phase of the battle plan had been inspired by human military history, specifically the tactics used by smaller forces against overwhelmingly superior enemies. Instead of meeting the Devourers head-on, the Human Council Alliance began what military historians would later call the largest strategic withdrawal in galactic history. Defiance to all ships, execute Protocol Marathon, Mitchell ordered. The entire defensive fleet suddenly scattered, not in retreat, but in a carefully choreographed dance that drew the Devourer ships away from Earth and deeper into the solar system. As they moved, they left behind something that no previous Devourer enemy had ever deployed: aggressive autonomous defense systems. First wave of Prometheus mines are active, reported Dr. Chun. Gravitational anomaly fields are online. The space around Earth suddenly became a maze of invisible gravitational traps, each one designed to disrupt the navigation systems of ships traveling at the speeds the Devourers preferred. As the first Devourer vessels entered the field, their perfect formation began to wobble. "It's working," Lieutenant Commander Zhang reported excitedly. "Their formation integrity is degrading. They're having to slow down to maintain coordination." Phase 2, Mitchell ordered. "All Atlas units, you are cleared for bombardment." What happened next had never been attempted in galactic warfare. Instead of engaging the enemy directly, the Human Council Alliance began pelting them with accelerated asteroids, space debris, and even decommissioned satellites, all moving at significant fractions of the speed of light thanks to Council propulsion technology. The Devourer ships, designed to absorb energy weapons and technological attacks, suddenly found themselves being battered by simple kinetic impacts that their defensive systems weren't optimized to handle. It was like using advanced shields to stop bullets and being hit with thrown rocks instead. Kinetic bombardment is having an effect, Admiral Volkov reported from his position. Their smaller vessels are taking damage, and they're having to divert power to structural integrity fields. "Excellent," Mitchell replied. "Now, let's see how they handle something really unexpected." The third phase of the plan was pure human innovation applied to Council technology. Instead of traditional ship-to-ship combat, the Alliance began deploying what human engineers had dubbed surprise packages. These were Council quantum displacement devices loaded with human-designed explosive payloads that could materialize directly inside enemy ships. "Deployment successful," Dr. Chen reported. "We're reading internal explosions on 7 Devourer vessels. For the first time in recorded galactic history, a Devourer ship actually stopped moving. The massive vessel, nearly 100 kilometers long, simply hung in space as secondary explosions rippled across its hull. All vessels, concentrate fire on the damaged ship," Mitchell ordered. "Show them what happens when their perfect coordination breaks down." The combined firepower of 42 ships focused on the wounded Devourer vessel, and something unprecedented happened. The ship's hull breached, atmosphere vented into space, and debris began spinning away from the impact points. "Confirmed Devourer vessel destruction," Zhang reported, his voice filled with disbelief. "We actually killed one." The celebration was short-lived. The remaining 18 Devourer ships suddenly changed their approach, abandoning their previous formation and beginning to move in ways that suggested they were learning from what had just happened. "They're adapting," Kethra warned through the communication system. "Energy signatures indicate they're modifying their defensive systems in real time." "Of course they are," Mitchell muttered. Okay, people, time for the real test. All ships, execute Protocol Thermopylae. The scattered human council fleets suddenly reverse course, abandoning their hit-and-run tactics and forming up into a tight defensive formation directly between the Devourer fleet and Earth. It was exactly the kind of heroic last stand that human military fiction had been preparing for throughout their history. Commander, Admiral Volkov's voice carried concern. Are you certain about this? We're abandoning our tactical advantage. No, Mitchell replied, watching as the Devourer's ships accelerated toward their formation. We're giving them exactly what they expect so they don't see what's actually coming. The Devourer fleet, apparently satisfied that the humans and Council had finally reverted to predictable defensive behavior, formed up into their traditional consumption formation and began their final approach. Their massive ships powered up weapons systems that could sterilize planets, energy shields that could absorb the combined firepower of entire fleets, and boarding systems designed to capture and process every living thing they encountered. What they didn't notice was that the Human Council defensive formation was positioned precisely over a small asteroid that had been hollowed out and converted into something that would have been impossible without combining human military innovation with Council advanced technology. Dr. Chun, Mitchell said quietly. Authorization code Alpha 77. Deploy Pandora. Authorization confirmed, Dr. Chun replied. Deploying Pandora in 3, 2, 1. The asteroid beneath them split open like a flower, revealing the most dangerous weapon either species had ever created. Billions of nanoscale devices erupted into space, each one programmed with a simple directive: consume the organic components of anything tagged as Devourer and convert the material into more nanoscale devices. The invisible swarm spread through space faster than light, carried by quantum displacement technology that allowed them to appear directly inside the Devourer ships before their defenses could react. Pandora deployment successful, Dr. Chin reported. Nanoscale conversion process is initiating throughout the Devourer fleet. The results were immediate and terrifying. The massive Devourer ships began to change, their hybrid organic technological structure being consumed and converted from the inside out. What had once been the galaxy's most unstoppable force was being eaten alive by weapons so small they were essentially invisible. All Devourer vessels are showing structural degradation, Zhang reported. Their formation is collapsing. But as they watched, something unexpected happened. The largest Devourer ship, the 300-kilometer command vessel, began to change in ways that suggested it was fighting back against the nanoscale assault. Commander, Ketharay's voice carried alarm. We're detecting massive energy buildup from their lead ship. It appears they're attempting to sterilize themselves to stop the nanoscale conversion. Will it work? Mitchell asked. Unknown, Dr. Chin replied. We're in uncharted territory here. The Devourer command ship suddenly blazed with energy, burning away sections of its own hull in an attempt to destroy the nanoscale weapons consuming it. For a moment, it seemed to work. The massive vessel stabilized, and its energy output returned to normal levels. Then it exploded. The detonation was visible from Earth's surface, a new star that blazed for several minutes before fading. When the light cleared, nothing remained of the 300-kilometer ship except expanding debris. All remaining Devourer vessels are destroyed, Zhang reported. No survivors detected. The communication system activated one final time. A different Devourer being appeared on screen, this one clearly damaged by the nanoscale weapons, but still functional. Species designation, human, it said, its voice distorted by system failures. Your engineering approach to extinction has proven effective. This outcome was not predicted in our consumption models. Good, Mitchell replied. Maybe now you'll think twice before trying to consume someone else. Consumption will not be attempted again, the being confirmed. Your solution to inevitable extinction has been educational. We withdraw. The transmission ended. After 3,000 years of unopposed destruction, the Devourers were retreating. As celebration erupted across the communications channels, Mitchell looked at the tactical display, showing the debris field where the most feared force in the galaxy had been only minutes before. All ships, return to Earth orbit, she commanded. We have a galaxy to call with some very good news. The battle was over. Humanity had won their first interstellar war. More importantly, the galaxy was finally safe. 5 years had passed since the Battle of Sol, and the galaxy had transformed in ways that no one could have predicted. The massive space station orbiting Earth had grown from a military construction facility into something that served as both the headquarters of the new Galactic Defense Force and a symbol of what cooperation between species could achieve. Commander Sarah Mitchell, now bearing the rank of Admiral and the title Defender of the Galaxy in 17 different languages, stood in the observation lounge of what was now called Unity Station. Through the transparent aluminum viewports, she could see ships from dozens of species coming and going, their designs now incorporating the hybrid human council technology that had proven so effective against the Devourers. "Quite a view," came a familiar harmonic voice behind her. Mitchell turned to see High Admiral Kethare approaching, her 6 arms carrying the ever-present data tablets, though these days they contained very different information than military reports. "Hard to believe it's only been 5 years, Mitchell replied, gesturing toward the ships outside. "Sometimes I feel like we're living in someone else's future." "In many ways, we are," Kethare said, joining her at the viewport. "This is not the galaxy any of us expected to see." And it truly wasn't. The defeat of the Devourers had sent shockwaves through galactic civilization that were still reverberating. For 3 millennia, the Council had governed through careful consensus, avoiding conflict and maintaining the status quo. The discovery that overwhelming force could be defeated through innovation and determination had fundamentally changed how the galaxy approached problems. "Status report on the new member applications?" Mitchell asked. 14 additional species have requested council membership in the past month alone, Kethare replied. All of them cite the human model as their preferred approach to civilization development. The human model. That's what xenosociologists were calling the approach to advancement through controlled conflict and competitive innovation. Half the galaxy wanted to adopt it. The other half found it deeply disturbing. Any problems with the integration process? The Zelthans are having difficulty understanding the concept of acceptable losses in pursuit of advancement, Kethare said. And the Morphic Collective keeps asking if they can weaponize their shape-shifting abilities. Mitchell smiled. Tell the Morphics that's exactly the kind of thinking that wins wars. As for the Zelthans, maybe assign them to medical research. They'll find their own way to contribute. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Professor Quillnack, his slug-like form now sporting what appeared to be medals and honors from a dozen different species. As the first xenobiologist to correctly predict human behavior in combat, he had become something of a celebrity in academic circles. Admiral Mitchell, High Admiral Kethare, he greeted them. I thought you'd be interested in the latest reports from the expansion sectors. Good news or concerning news? Mitchell asked. Both, Professor Quillnack replied, activating a holographic display. The good news is that human-trained defense forces have successfully repelled 3 separate threats to frontier colonies. Pirates, territorial disputes, and even a small invasion force from outside our galaxy. And the concerning news? Some of our newer member species are becoming enthusiastic about applying human military doctrine to non-military situations. The Korthax Trade Federation has declared an economic war on their competitors. The Hexaped Mining Consortium is describing their expansion as a resource acquisition campaign. And the Flowering Worlds have started referring to their terraforming projects as ecological conquest. Mitchell sighed. We may have created a galaxy full of warmongers. Not warmongers, Kethare corrected. Competitors. There's a difference, though sometimes it's difficult to see. Speaking of competition, Professor Quillnack continued, we've received an interesting proposal from the Vegan Science Collective. They want to organize what they're calling the first Galactic Innovation War Games. Meaning, Species would compete to solve impossible problems under deadline pressure, with the winning solutions being implemented galaxy-wide. No actual warfare, but all the strategic thinking and innovative pressure that makes human-style advancement so effective. Mitchell considered this. That's actually brilliant. Controlled competition without the death and destruction. The preliminary event proposals include faster-than-light communication, terraforming acceleration, defensive systems against unknown threats, and something called recreational combat sports for species integration. I love this galaxy, Mitchell said with genuine enthusiasm. Set up a meeting with the Vegan Science Collective. Earth would be honored to participate. As Professor Quilnack departed to make arrangements, Mitchell and Kethar continued their observation of the bustling space traffic around Unity Station. The changes in the past 5 years had been remarkable not just in scale, but in character. The galaxy had gone from a place where species hid from threats to one where they actively sought out challenges to overcome. There is one other matter we need to discuss, Kethar said, her form dimming slightly. We've received communication from the outer galactic rim. Long-range sensors have detected the return of the Devourers. Mitchell felt her blood chill. How many? Unknown. They're still beyond our sensor range. But the transmission we received was different. Different how? Kethar activated her personal display, showing what appeared to be the same metallic being they had encountered 5 years ago, but its appearance had changed. Where before it had seemed coldly mechanical, now it appeared more organic, more alive. Species designation, human and galactic alliance. The being spoke, its voice carrying harmonics that actually sounded pleasant rather than unsettling. We return not for consumption, but for communication. They want to talk, Mitchell said. More than that, Kethar replied. They want to learn. The message continued. Your engineering approach to extinction prevention has proven more than effective. It has proven evolutionary. We have analyzed the results of our encounter with your alliance and have reached a conclusion that requires verification through further interaction, which is the process we designated consumption may have been an inferior approach to advancement. Your model of competitive cooperation appears to produce more robust and adaptable civilizations. We request permission to observe this process and, if acceptable, to participate in its implementation. Mitchell stared at the display in disbelief. They want to join the galaxy. It appears so. The question is whether the galaxy wants them to join. What do our xenopsychologists say? Dr. Velnara believes they're sincere. The Devourers evolved in a completely different environment from the rest of us. They developed consumption as a survival strategy because they believed it was the most efficient method of advancement. Seeing our approach succeed where theirs failed has apparently caused them to reevaluate their fundamental assumptions about evolution and civilization. Mitchell walked back to the viewport, watching the peaceful traffic of dozens of species working together to explore and develop the galaxy. It was hard to imagine the Devourers as part of this community, but then, again, it had been hard to imagine humans fighting alongside the Council 5 years ago. What's the Council's position? Mixed, Kethar admitted. Some species want nothing to do with them, regardless of their apparent change in behavior. Others are curious about what we could learn from a species that managed to survive and advance in total isolation for millions of years. And the human position? That, Kethar said with what might have been amusement, is why we're having this conversation. As the species that originally defeated the Devourers, Earth's opinion carries considerable weight in this decision. Mitchell thought about the implications. The Devourers have been the galaxy's greatest threat for 3,000 years. They had also been a species that had managed to survive and develop advanced technology in conditions that would have destroyed most other civilizations. The knowledge they possessed, the perspective they could offer, might be invaluable for a galaxy that was just learning how to face unknown challenges. What would integration look like? She asked. Gradual contact, supervised interaction, joint research projects. Professor Quilnack's voice came from behind them as he returned from his communication duties. We've developed protocols based on the human integration model. The Vegan Science Collective is particularly interested in devourer participation in the Innovation War games, HFY added. They believe a species that spent millennia solving survival problems through consumption might have unique perspectives on resource optimization and efficiency maximization. Mitchell made her decision. Set up a meeting with the full council. Tell them that Earth supports conditional integration of the devourers into galactic civilization, with appropriate safeguards and monitoring. Conditional on what? Professor Quilnack asked. On them proving they understand the difference between consumption and competition, Mitchell replied. If they want to join the galaxy, they need to show they can contribute to advancement without destroying what already exists. As they made arrangements for what would undoubtedly be the most controversial council session in galactic history, Mitchell reflected on how much had changed since that first meeting in New York 5 years ago. They had gone from a primitive species facing extinction to the leaders of a galactic renaissance, and now they were about to welcome their former would-be destroyers into the community of civilized species. You know, she said to HFY as they prepared to leave the observation lounge, when this is all over, we should write a book about it. What would you call it? Mitchell looked out at the galaxy one more time, watching ships from dozens of species working together to build something better than any of them could have achieved alone. How to Win Friends and Influence Galactic Civilizations, the human guide to turning enemies into allies through superior firepower and stubborn optimism. HFY's harmonic laughter filled the lounge. Only humans would find a way to make interstellar diplomacy sound like a military operation. That's because, Mitchell replied with a smile, for us, they're the same thing. 6 months later, the first Devourer representative would take their seat on the Galactic Council, beginning a new chapter in the history of a galaxy that had learned that sometimes the best way to achieve peace was to be very, very good at war. And in the years that followed, when new threats emerged from the dark spaces between galaxies, they would find that a universe full of species trained in the human arts of competitive cooperation and innovative warfare was a very dangerous place to be an uninvited guest. The galaxy had learned to fight back. More importantly, it had learned to fight together. And that, as it turned out, made all the difference.